another salacious, gratuitous, titillating, infuriating, and slightly nauseating episode of Sex in the Watchtower. Today we are diving back into the Jehovah's Witnesses' toothless and ineffectual policies on child molestation, and then we'll get back to the funny stuff, I promise. Our first article is called, Let Us Abhor What is Wicked.
Oh, please, sir, may we abhor what is wicked?
For example, if a dedicated girl commits fornication, she may bitterly regret her act and eventually be restored to spiritual health with the help of the congregation.
Oh, please, do tell how exactly the congregation plans to help. Because you know what? Shunning doesn't actually help anyone.
But what if she is pregnant because of her immorality?
My.
Then her whole life has been inescapably changed by what she did.
What she did? What about what he did? I mean, it takes two to tango, guys. What if this wasn't consensual? I mean, what if she was raped? You know, it's actually pretty common for the elders to decide in a judicial committee that a reported rape was actually fornication and then disfellowship the victim. It's happened many times. And even if the sex was consensual, how is depriving her and her future offspring of any kind of family or support system a good thing to do? How does that make any sense?
A man who commits adultery may repent and not be disfellowshipped, but his innocent mate has scriptural grounds to divorce him, and she may choose to do so. If she does, the man, although forgiven by Jehovah, will live the rest of his life with the grave consequence of his sin.
If the guy cheats, but spills his guts to the elders, and they consider him repentant, he might not get disfellowshipped. But his wife can divorce him, according to the Jehovah's Witnesses. She has permission, I guess. And if she does divorce him, this guy can never get married again until and unless she gets married again first. If he tries to date anyone, the elders will put the kibosh on that real quick. And if he goes and legally marries someone anyway, then he'll get disfellowshipped because he's not scripturally free. That's the kind of control they have.
What of a man who unlovingly divorces his wife in order to marry another woman? Perhaps he will eventually repent and be reinstated in the congregation. Over the years, he may make progress and press on to maturity. But as long as his first wife lives without a mate, he will not qualify to serve in a responsible position in the congregation. He is not a husband of one wife because he had no scriptural right to divorce his first wife. Are these not powerful reasons why a Christian should cultivate an abhorrence of what is wicked?
Seriously? Microphone privileges? Titles? No, they're not powerful reasons at all. What the fuck? Who cares? Look, I get that this isn't good behavior, and I'm very personally well aware of how badly it sucks to be cheated on, or how painful divorce is, even if you can't stand to be in the same room with the person anymore. But none of these cases they're talking about here are any of the congregation's business. At all. Nobody should really care about your sex life at all, as long as all the activities you're engaging in are consensual. If two people don't want to be married anymore, then leave them the hell alone and let them get down to the courthouse.
What if a baptized adult Christian sexually molests a child? Is the sinner so wicked that Jehovah will never forgive him? Not necessarily so.
What the fuck, Jehovah? There are way too many qualifiers here. I don't care if the perp is baptized or not, whether he's over 18 or over 21 or whatever. Sexual molestation of children is wrong. Full stop. And I just love how Jehovah can find it in his heart to forgive a baptized adult child molester, but not, in my experience, a 7-year-old girl who has been molested.
Jesus said that blasphemy against the Holy Spirit was unforgivable.
Blasphemy!
And Paul said that there is no sacrifice for sins left for one who practices sin willfully, despite knowing the truth. But nowhere does the Bible say that an adult Christian who sexually abuses a child, whether incestuously or otherwise, cannot be forgiven.
What? Well, the Bible does condone slavery and genocide, so, and while we're talking about what's not in the Bible, how about this one? The word disfellowshipped. And again, why do they need to qualify the child molester here? I mean, why is it important to say an adult specifically? Are minors who molest little kids somehow different?
Indeed, his sins can be washed clean if he repents sincerely from the heart and turns his conduct around. However, he may still have to struggle with the wrong fleshly impulses he cultivated. And there may be consequences that he cannot avoid. Depending on the law of the land where he lives, the molester may well have to serve a prison term or face other sanctions from the state. The congregation will not protect him from this.
Then maybe you can explain the two-witness rule, guys. Explain why you blame and silence victims, Watchtower. Explain why you only report to authorities if the legal department tells you you have to.
Moreover, the man has revealed a serious weakness that henceforth will have to be taken into account. If he seems repentant...
So, how does one seem to be repentant, pray tell? Can't the Spirit-directed but not inspired elders tell? Can't Jehovah read his heart to the elders like a little golden book or something? He's very, very sorry he got caught, but he's kind of relieved that he's not going to have to work the literature counter anymore. That will give him time to go out in service with Sister Applewhite and her 3 children.
He will be encouraged to make spiritual progress, share in the field service, even have parts in the theocratic ministry school, and non-teaching parts in the service meeting. This does not mean, though, that he will qualify to serve in a position of responsibility in the congregation.
So we've established that he can't carry microphones or have a title like ministerial servant or elder. He can't push buttons on the sound console or hand out literature from the counter in the back, but he can still go door to door with all of the kids in the congregation. He can still walk around neighborhoods around all the unsuspecting children in the community, and nobody gets warned that he's a kitty fiddler. Yeah, that's true. You try and warn someone and you'll get disfellowship for slandering him. What the fuck?
What are the scriptural reasons for this?
I don't give a flying fuck at a rolling donut.
For one thing, an elder must be self-controlled. Experience has shown that such an adult may well molest other children. True, not every child molester repeats the sin, but many do.
The actual statistic is that something like 1/4 of all reported offenders reoffend. But that doesn't take into account all the cases in which no reports are actually made, and that would include all of the cases in Jehovah's Witness congregations because most of the time, they don't report.
For the protection of our children, a man known to have been a child molester does not qualify for a responsible position in the congregation. Moreover, he cannot be a pioneer or serve in any other special full-time service.
This sounds nice and all, but it doesn't mean a damn thing.
The congregation has a responsibility before Jehovah to protect its children.
Yeah, it does. And it's failing miserably. Honestly, it's looking like this is some pretty bullshit to me. Look, the congregation didn't protect me, or my cousin, or my sister, or any of the other people I personally know who were sexually abused as a Jehovah's Witness child. In fact, they actively made things worse. And by the looks of the international news media over the past couple years, not much has changed since I was 7.
Well-trained children learn to obey and honor their parents, the elders, and other adults.
Right. Which is why Jehovah's Witness children make particularly attractive victims. They're pre-groomed.
It would be a shocking perversion if one of these authority figures were to misuse that child's innocent trust so as to seduce or force him or her to submit to sexual acts.
But you know what's more disturbing and shocking? The fact that Jehovah's Witnesses do more to protect the perpetrator from justice than they do to protect the children. And they often punish and blame the victims because it's easier to shut a kid up than it is to report a crime to the authorities. Cowards. But here's something else that's interesting. Notice how they say seduce or force. The force we all understand, right? But usually, molesters don't use force. Molesters groom their victims. And a lot of times, for a million different reasons, the victim doesn't fight or scream or really even protest. That does not mean, however, that they've been seduced. To seduce means to entice someone into sexual activity. It implies that the victim has consented. Jehovah's Witnesses don't understand consent, by the way, not at all. This is not the case with victims of child abuse. They might not fight, but not fighting does not equal consent. And you know why? Because children are not capable of consenting to sex. They don't even have the tools to understand what that means. So when the Jehovah's Witness elders conclude that a child has been seduced, they are implying consent. As in, I'll let you touch my private areas in exchange for that 5 pounds of candy you promised me, and thus making the victim into a participant. What they're doing here is shifting the blame on a very, very basic level. This is sick, and it's stupid, and it's wrong.
Those who have been sexually molested in this way often struggle for years to overcome the resulting emotional trauma.
Let's not even get started on the trauma of being told by the elders, with the full support of your parents, that the whole thing is your fault because you're cute.
Hence, a child molester is subject to severe congregational discipline and restrictions.
Okay, I'm going to need them to define the word severe. Because what we've read here is not nearly severe enough. It's not severe at all. Look, nobody cares about this dude's congregational privileges. Even being disfellowshipped is not severe enough because all he has to do is wait 6 months, keep coming to meetings and scoping out his next victim in the meantime, cry a little, and he's back in the congregation. That's if he's punished at all. Often molesters aren't punished because there isn't an audience present when they commit their crimes, and thus elders don't believe little kids, especially girls, when they report.
It is not his status as an authority figure that should be of concern, but rather the unblemished purity of the congregation.
What about the unblemished purity of the child? Does anybody give a shit about the kids here? Anybody?
If a child molester sincerely repents, he will recognize the wisdom of applying Bible principles. If he truly learns to abhor what is wicked, he will despise what he did and struggle to avoid repeating his sin.
But the Jehovah's Witnesses won't do anything to make it difficult for him to repeat the performance. No, they seem to do everything they can to make it as easy to reoffend as possible.
Further, he will surely thank Jehovah for the greatness of his love, as a result of which a repentant sinner, such as he is, can still worship our holy God and hope to be among the upright who will reside on earth forever.
Motherfucker, do I look like I care about a child molester's feelings? Who cares about his struggle? Who gives a shit how he sleeps at night? How does he get to be in paradise while the kid he molested ends up shunned, huh? How does he get welcomed back into the congregation while his victims get slandered and abused and further by the very people who should be protecting them? What kind of pathetic, evil, amoral excuse for God would actually allow this? Okay, it's getting hot out here and I am so over this. Let's change the subject. In 1998, the Witnesses delved into the cultural traditions of somewhere other than the U.S., apparently. This article is called Resist Ungodly Traditions.
Another custom involves ceremonial cleansing after the death of one's spouse. If a wife dies, her family will bring to the widower a sister-in-law or another woman closely related to his deceased wife. He is obliged to have sexual intercourse with her.
Much obliged, little lady.
Only then can he marry whomever he wishes. The same takes place when a woman's husband dies. This practice is thought to purify the surviving spouse of the spirit of the dead mate.
I can definitely see how this might get a little bit awkward. I mean, I cannot imagine my brother-in-law trying this if something happened to my husband. Wow, that would be a bad scene. Ditto if the shoe were on the other foot. Although, if the afterlife were actually a thing, I think I would like to see his reaction if such a thing happened, because I imagine it would be nothing short of hilarious. In a horribly morbid sort of way.
Anyone refusing to undergo such cleansing risks incurring the wrath of the relatives. He or she may be isolated and subjected to mockery and pronouncements of doom.
Well, gosh golly gee, that sounds an awful lot like being disfellowshipped.
Nevertheless, Christians refuse to follow this custom. They know that far from being a sort of cleansing, sex outside marriage is defiling in the eyes of God. Furthermore, Christians are to marry only in the Lord.
Why would the relatives be upset? I mean, I feel like they've left something out here. This doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. But then, I guess that's par for the course. What we're reading, never mind. Imagine being isolated and subjected to mockery and pronouncements of doom. I have no idea what that's like. None at all. And I wonder why they tacked on this admonition about Christians only marrying in the Lord. I mean, I would think that's a given to Jehovah's Witnesses at this point, but if they have to be told that it's not okay to screw their sister-in-law if their wife dies, then maybe they're not terribly bright. I don't know. Speaking of not being terribly bright, our next article is from a 1998 Awake. It's called Discrimination Against Females.
Every year, an estimated 1 million children, mostly girls, are forced or sold into prostitution. Araya, who comes from Southeast Asia, recalls what happened to some of her classmates. Kulvati became a prostitute when she was only 13. She was a nice girl, but her mother often got drunk and used to play poker, so she had no time to care for her daughter. Kulvati's mother encouraged her to earn money by going out with men, and before long, she was working as a prostitute.
And listen up, sisters. If you drink and play poker, you're only a breath away from neglecting your children and selling them into prostitution. Put down the rosé.
Sivun, another pupil in my class, came from the north of the country. She was just 12 when her parents sent her to the capital to work as a prostitute. She had to work for 2 years to pay off the contract signed by her parents. Sivun and Kulvati are not unusual. 5 out of the 15 girls in my class became prostitutes.
What kind of parents do they have in Southeast Asia? What kind of prostitutes have employment contracts? I think I'm missing something here. Or else Watchtower is. seriously, I'm not making light of human trafficking or child prostitution. It's horrible. But I sure wish the witnesses would try to be part of the solution instead of just recounting these stories in lurid detail as proof of how holy they are compared to the rest of the world. Because clearly, all of us worldly people are out here playing poker, drinking beer, and selling our kids to dirty old tourists.
Who is to blame for this horrendous practice? Obviously, those who buy or sell girls into prostitution bear a huge part of the blame, but also, to be condemned are the despicable men who use the girls to satisfy sexual lusts. For without such practicers of immorality, the prostitution of these girls would not exist.
And that's it. That's all. This entire article is nothing but a description about how much it sucks to be a woman in different cultures. There are no solutions, no empathy, nothing. Just a big, fat, gratuitous, sucks to be you. Thanks, Watchtower! Our next bit of rubbish comes from a book called How to Remain in God's Love. Now, I'm not sure when this was published because I'm working from jw.org and they conveniently don't have a publication date on it. I'm certain that I do have a copy somewhere in the giant pile, but it's way too much trouble to go look for it. So, here we are, and I'm shoving it into the late 90s because I feel like it. Here we go, a chapter entitled Flee from Sexual Immorality. Run away!
Many people today have a brazen attitude and openly disrespect God's laws on sex.
To be brazen means literally to be made out of brass, or more commonly, to be bold and without shame. Being brazen means having brass balls. Doesn't sound like such a bad thing to me.
In the Bible, sexual immorality refers to sexual activity between people who are not scripturally married to each other. It includes sexual activity between people of the same gender and sex between humans and animals. Sexual activity can be sexual relations, oral sex, anal sex, or touching another person's genitals in a sexual way.
Goodness gracious, thank you, Watchtower. We would never have been able to figure out how you felt about same-sex relationships or bestiality or oral sex without this handy explanation.
The Bible makes it clear that if someone continues to practice sexual immorality, he cannot remain in the congregation. Additionally, an immoral person loses respect for himself and the trust of others.
One of my college professors used to say that you can't legislate morality. The reason is because morality is subjective. Morality depends on your culture, your past experience, and your immediate situation. You need an example? Okay, how about this? Do you agree that you should follow the law of the land? Yes? Being a law-abiding citizen is a moral thing to do, right? Sure, okay. Now, suppose that you live in 1940s Germany, and the law of the land involves turning in your Jewish neighbors to the Gestapo and reporting anyone who tries to help them. Where's your moral high ground now? What the Jehovah's Witnesses do is try to legislate morality for their followers. Any type of sex that they don't specifically allow is considered immoral, even if it's consensual oral sex between two people who are married to each other. Hell, you can't even touch your own junk in the shower. And yet these fine, upstanding arbiters of morality don't report child molesters to the authorities and fully expect families to banish any one of their members if the elders tell them to, regardless of the circumstances. Now, which is more immoral? That or giving your boyfriend head?
Immorality always results in problems. It usually leads to a guilty conscience and often brings unwanted pregnancy, marriage problems, disease, or even death.
Do you notice how weaselly this is? Sure, immorality, meaning not having good ethics, has lots of problems associated with it. But in the Jehovah's Witness mind, immorality equals sex, period. So what they're saying is that sex always results in problems. Unless you're married to another Jehovah's Witness and you're only doing it in the approved position, I guess.
If a person really stopped and thought about what immorality leads to, he probably would not want to be immoral. But often a person is thinking only about satisfying his own desires when he takes the first step toward immorality.
Look, nobody wants to be immoral. But sex is a normal human need once you pass puberty, and there is nothing wrong with that. So if we replace the word immoral with what they really mean here, they're saying if a person really stopped and thought about what sex leads to, he probably wouldn't want to have sex. And we all know what bullshit that is.
So when wrong thoughts enter your mind, get rid of them immediately.
What is a wrong thought? Well, that is, if you're a Jehovah's Witness, any sexual thought at all. Now, think about being a normal teenager. How the hell are you supposed to get rid of that many thoughts? You'd be doing nothing but trying to get rid of sexual thoughts. And while you were doing that, more sexual thoughts would be rolling on in, jerking off in the corner, waiting for you to deal with the first round. Incidentally, there's a research study in the Journal of Sex Research that says that men think about sex an average of 19 times a day, while women, on average, report 10 times a day. Now, I think the average poor, repressed Jehovah's Witness is probably way more than that. You can't think about anything else, can you?
If you accidentally see erotic images, look away.
The problem is that when you're that repressed, you start seeing things. Everything looks erotic. Everything. It's even in the literature.
One young brother became trapped in the habit of viewing pornography and masturbating. His friends at school felt that these things were a normal part of growing up, but he said, "It damaged my conscience, and I was drawn into a life of immorality."
Jehovah's Witnesses like to teach their children that the kids at school are having porn watching and masturbating parties all the time. But guess what, guys? That's crazy. Crazy. In my experience, in high school, if you even gave off a whiff that you might jerk it occasionally, you'd be teased relentlessly. Kids aren't sitting around talking about how they watched porn and jerked off unless things have changed dramatically. I mean, I realize I'm getting old, but I'm not that old. Also, don't you love the language here? He was drawn into a life of immorality. He didn't want to watch Debbie Does Dallas, but he couldn't stop himself. The demons made him to. He was led down the primrose path by Debbie and her double Ds and bears no personal responsibility for what he did to his body member at all.
He realized he needed to control his desires, and with Jehovah's help, he was able to break his habit. If you have immoral thoughts, ask Jehovah for power beyond what is normal to keep your thoughts clean.
What did Jehovah do? Hit the off switch on his hormones? Please.
We can see how important our choice of friends is from what happened to Dinah. She was one of Jacob's daughters, so she was raised in a family who worshiped Jehovah. Dinah was not an immoral person, but she became close friends with Canaanite girls who did not worship Jehovah.
Well, we know where this is going.
The Canaanites had a very different view of sex from that of God's people and were known for being immoral.
Those harlots!
While Dinah was with her friends, she met a young Canaanite man named Shechem, who found her attractive. Shechem was considered the most honorable young man in his family, but he did not love Jehovah.
You know what? He probably never even heard of Jehovah. Maybe she should have witnessed to him, Obviously. If you love Jehovah, you will be totally asexual. Duh! And you will not inspire anyone else to have sexual thoughts either. Because that's totally something Dinah could control. Totally.
Shechem did what seemed natural and acceptable to him. Because he was attracted to Dinah, he took her and violated her. This crime started a series of events that resulted in tragedy for Dinah and her whole family.
You know, somehow I don't think this is actually the whole story. See, if you actually read the story in the Bible, it says Shechem was in love with Dinah and sent his father to negotiate their marriage, which her father agreed to. And he made all the Canaanite men get circumcised. Ouch! And dude, they did it. They did it. That is how much Shechem loved Dinah. That doesn't really sound like a rape situation to me. And Dinah's father and brothers are the ones who behaved immorally here and went back on their promise and started killing people and looting. Check this out. Genesis chapter 34, verse 25 through, 29 or something. 3 days later, while all of them were still in pain, two of Jacob's sons, Simeon and Levi, Dinah's brothers, took their swords and attacked the unsuspecting city, killing every male. They put Hamor and his son Shechem to the sword and took Dinah from Shechem's house and left. The sons of Jacob came upon the dead bodies and looted the city where their sister had been defiled. They seized their flocks and herds and donkeys and everything else of theirs in the city and out in the fields. They carried off all their wealth and all their women and children, taking as plunder everything in the houses. How the fuck are these supposed to be the good guys?
We do not have to make the same mistakes that Dinah made to learn that Jehovah's moral standards are good for us.
Once again, in case you missed it, the ham-handed point the witnesses are trying to make with this story is that if you hang out with worldly people, you're going to get raped and killed. And then I guess your family's going to murder everyone in town and steal all their stuff and take their families into slavery and,
For example, imagine this situation. At a sister's place of work, a man begins to give her special attention and invites her to go out on a date. He doesn't serve Jehovah, but he seems very nice and kind.
Well, what's the problem? Honestly, he's much more likely to consider becoming a Jehovah's Witness if he's interested in this sister, isn't he? Seems to me like they're missing an opportunity here. I mean, this way's gotta be more successful than door-to-door work, I'm just saying.
Another sister sees them together and later tries to warn her about it. How will the first sister react? Will she defend herself? Or will she see the wisdom in the warning?
You know what? She should tell that busybody bitch to mind her own damn business. She didn't have to defend herself because she goes out on a date with someone who's nice and kind and interested in her. What the hell?
The sister may love Jehovah and want to do what is right, but if she keeps going out with this man, is she fleeing from sexual immorality, or is she trusting in her own heart?
My.
Why are they just assuming that because he's not a Jehovah's Witness, they're going to jump into the bushes outside Starbucks and start humping each other immediately? Why is sexual immorality their first stop here? We also see another serious Jehovah's Witness problem here, though. The fact that trusting in your own heart is a huge no-no. You're not supposed to trust in your own heart. You're not even supposed to be able to hear your inner voice anymore. You're taught as a Jehovah's Witness to suppress your gut feelings and replace them with Watchtower instructions. So if something feels right in your heart, you know something's wrong. Dude, bro, these people are sick. Well, that's all for today, y'all. We didn't quite make it to Y2K, but in the spirit of nostalgia, I'll make you wait for it. The next set of articles I have for you are back on the subject of child abuse, which they seemed very concerned with in the late 90s, but not concerned enough. I think this was around the same time that our heroes Bill Bowen and Barbara Anderson went public. So they came out with all these crappy damage control articles from the Watchtower and still didn't actually change anything. But don't worry, there's still more articles about Baal worship and premarital sex and all that stuff. Tune in for episode number 9 to see what all the fuss is about. Until then, I'm Sister Fister. This is crazy.